So on today's episode, I'm going to be taking you through my tier list ranking of every single 5-color commander. So on episodes like these, I take you from the D tier with the weakest of the 5-color commanders and work our way up through C, B, and A tier, all the way up to the most powerful commanders with the S tier commanders. And of course, with 5-color commanders, there are a ton of very powerful ones out there, so there's a lot of competition for that S tier ranking. That being said, a quick disclaimer before we get started. These tier rankings are 100% based off of my own opinions, and your opinions on these might vary, and that's okay. These rankings are also done in a vacuum. That means that these commanders are being compared to each other, just 5-color commanders being compared to each other, not compared to outside commanders. Also, another very important point to bring up. I am not a EDH player, so if the most powerful version of a deck built around one of these commanders involves, combos like Food Chain, too bad that's not really being taken into consideration, because at a casual table, you're not going to see something like that. Again, I should say 99.999% of the time, so it's not taken into account for this. Basically, the way that I look at it is this: if I sit down at a casual table, how powerful can I expect each of these commanders to be with the builds that I am expecting to see of them based on, again, casual play? So Demonic Consultation, Thassa's Oracle, or Food Chain combos are not in consideration. So just keep that in mind. And also with these tier rankings, another thing you might want to keep in mind is that you should be blaming Eddie in the comments below if you disagree with any of these picks, because it's always Eddie's fault and not mine, and Eddie did help me out on this episode. In all seriousness, a big thank you to Eddie for the great discussions around these commanders, and yeah, there are plenty of them that we disagreed on, but yeah, always blame Eddie in the comments below, because no matter what, it's always Eddie's fault and not mine. But now with all that said, let's jump into it. So first up, we're going to be starting off the D tier with Chromat, which has a ton of abilities, but yeah, this commander is pretty, let's just say, lackluster, and there's a reason why it sees its place in the lowest of the tiers. It is an older card, so I will read its Oracle text. It's a 5/5 illusion for Wooburg, and it has: pay white-black, destroy target creature blocking or blocked by Chromat. Pay blue-red, Chromat gains flying until end of turn. Pay black and a green, regenerate Chromat. Pay red-white, Chromat gets +1/+1 until end of turn. And pay green-blue, put Chromat on top of its owner's library. Yeah, this commander has been a joke commander for quite some time, and yeah, it's actually kind of a perfect commander if you want to have, maybe a secret commander in your deck, because Chromat obviously gives you access to all 5 colors, which is great, but it also basically does, well, not much of anything. Sure, if you generate infinite mana, yeah, I mean, you can make Chromat infinitely large if you really want to, and give it flying, and yeah, maybe get it through on a player and take them out, but still, there's a lot more effective ways to win with a lot of other commanders out there, and Chromat, although it does have a lot of abilities, again, is just very lackluster and not powerful at all, and is definitely deserving of the title of a D tier commander. Speaking of which, we've got one other commander joining Chromat in the D tier with Atagatog, and though I do love this card, it is not very good at all. Again, it's an older creature from back in Odyssey, so I'll read its Oracle text: a 5/5 Atog that costs Wooburg, and it says sacrifice an Atog creature. Atagatog gets +X/+X until on a turn, X the sacrifice creature's power. And here's the thing, there are 12 Atogs in Magic, including this one. Now, yes, there are also changelings out there, but still, the Atogs themselves are not very powerful at all for the most part. I mean, yes, I know Psychotog was incredibly powerful back in the day in Standard, but, I mean, outside of, the Psychotog upheaval deck, yeah, I mean, in a commander situation, the Atogs really aren't very synergistic together for the most part. There's a lot of different ways that Atogs gain power, and sure, maybe you get lucky and you can sacrifice a knife of Atogs to actually get this to be massive and maybe take one player out, but again, that's a lot of resources dedicated to try to do that. And yeah, overall, there's just a lot more powerful commanders out there, especially in 5 colors, so Atog, I am so sorry, but you are a D tier commander. So now let's move on to the C tier with another tribal commander, but this one with a more supported tribe with Horde of Notions. Horde of Notions is a 5/5 elemental that's got Vigilance, Trample, and Haste for Wooburg that has Pay Wooburg. You may play target elemental card from your graveyard without paying its mana cost. Now that is not a bad ability at all, but it is a pretty big investment, and obviously you need perfect mana fixing to be able to actually do that, so that can again just be a lot of commitment to that ability to actually get things back out of your graveyard. And again, with elementals, you've got a lot of options for elementals, but when it comes to being supported as a tribe, generally those elementals are kind of working on their own. There really aren't a ton of, broad elemental benefits that you are getting, where some other tribes might just have very specific cards for that tribe that are incredible. And we'll talk about some of those tribes here in a bit. So at the end of the day, this is a good commander, not a great one that can do some powerful things, but again requires a lot of setup to do so. So for all those reasons, in comparison to all the other 5-color commanders out there, this is a C tier commander. Speaking of which, next up we've got yet another elemental with Gigantha the Wellspring. And of course, Gigantha can actually be your companion as well, but we're not going to be considering that for this evaluation because we're evaluating it as a commander. Regardless, a 5/5 elemental elk that costs 4 and a rule that has tap add Wooburg. This mana can't be spent to pay generic mana cost. So this commander is essentially just a huge mana dork. That's basically what it is. I mean, yes, you can tap for 5 mana, which is great, but again, you cannot utilize that mana for generic mana cost. So there are going to be times where you can utilize a lot of that mana, but there are also going to be times where maybe you can only utilize 1 or 2 of the pips, and so yeah, it doesn't really give you all that much value on those turns. Overall, not a bad commander, but again, there are a ton of heavy hitters in 5-color, and Gigantha is definitely not one of the most threatening ones, so Gigantha, welcome to the C tier. Also joining you in the C tier is Corona False God. With her Oracle tech, she is a 5/5 hasty avatar that costs 1 in Wooburg, and at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player untaps Corona False God and gains control of it, and whenever she attacks, creatures of the creature type of your choice get +3/+3 until end of turn. So this commander can be a great finisher for a tribal style deck by pumping your team, but also it can be a very risky commander in that again, you are going to be giving this commander to every other player at the table, and they can pump their team, or at least, a certain creature type as well. Now, there are some really exciting and off-the-wall things that you can do with this commander, and it's a very unique one, but again, it is a risky commander to play, and though it can help you finish off your opponents, it can also help your opponents finish you off too. So at the end of the day, it is definitely not one of the worst commanders out there in 5-color. Sorry again, Chromat and Atagatog, but it is definitely not one of the best either. So Corona False God, you have finished in the C tier. Next up, though, we've got a very different commander with Progenitus, a 10/10 Hydra avatar that costs double Wooburg, so that's white, white, blue, blue, black, black, red, red, and green, green. And it's a very simple commander that has protection from everything. Okay, I guess, and on top of that, if we put a graveyard from anywhere, reveal it and shell them to Summoner's Library instead, but you're probably not going to do that with your commander regardless. So this commander is an incredibly heavy hitter, and it's really, really hard to deal with in a lot of circumstances. But of course, its mana cost is absurd. You need perfect mana fixing at 10 mana for 2 mana of each color, and that can take, well, a little while to actually get to, obviously, so you need to be able to protect yourself in the meantime. And also, again, although it does have protection from everything, that counts you as well, so you can't just, equip Swiftfoot Boots to it or anything like that. There are some ways to pump it, but those ways involve anthems, obviously, which is a bit more limited than being able to utilize equipment as well. And again, protection from everything from your opponent's stuff, yes, does help with targeted removal, but it does not help with things like, say, regular board wipes. Like a Wrath of God will still take this out, as will Edict effects. So yeah, I mean, this commander can still be dealt with. Yes, is incredibly deadly when it is up there and pretty hard to deal with, but still at 10 mana with perfect mana fixing, Progenitus, you are quite costly, and you are in the C tier as a result. Moving on, we've got Coyote, Soul of Kamigawa, a 3/3 Dragon Spirit with Flash and Flying that costs 3 and a white, and it has, when it enters the battlefield, any other target permanent gains indestructible for as long as you control Coyote, and by paying Wooburg, Coyote gets +5/+5 until end of turn. Now that last part is nice, but it's kind of just stapled on there, and again, kind of like, Horde of Notions, that is a big investment for the activation of that ability. And while it does have a nice additional benefit, again, of having Flash and be able to protect another one of your permanents, sure, that's nice if you really want to set up a very specific combo, maybe, potentially to protect one of those pieces, but still, the level of this commander just isn't up to even the mid-tier level in comparison to other 5-color commanders out there. It is definitely not the lowest of the low, but it is definitely deserving of the title of a C tier commander. Speaking of which, another Dragon Spirit is going to be joining the C tier as well with Okagachi Vengeful Kami. This is a 6/6 Dragon Spirit with Flying and Trample that costs 1 and Wooburg, and whenever it deals counter damage to a player, if that player attacked you during their last turn, exile target non-land permanent that player controls. So this commander can in some ways be an effective deterrent from your opponents attacking you, because if you are able to get damage through on them with this, you can take away some of their permanents. That being said, again, this does not have haste, so you can't just get Retribution right away if this isn't already in play, and even if it is in play and it gets dealt with, well, your opponents are probably going to get away with actually attacking you. So this effect can be pretty circumstantial and might not always benefit you when you need it to. At the end of the day, with all these factors in mind in comparison to all the other 5-color commanders, this is a C tier commander. And finally, rounding out the C tier, we've got Tazri, Beacon of Unity, a 4/6 human warrior for 4 and a white. And of course, this spell costs 1 less cast for each creature in your party, and you can pay, get ready for it, 2 or a blue, 2 or a black, 2 or a red, 2 or a green to look at the top 6 cards of your library. You may reveal up to 2 Cleric, Rogue, Warrior, Wizard, and or Ally cards from among them, put them on your hand, put the rest of them on your library in a random order. So this is definitely a party tribal commander, and party does have some nice effects out there, but not a ton, and there's not really a ton of support for that. It's definitely not a bad commander. I mean, it can, reduce its cost by quite a bit, up to 4 essentially, because again, allies don't actually count toward your party, but still the other creature types it lists do. And it can get you more creatures off the top of your library into your hand, though again, that is a decent mana investment to do so, but obviously if you've got better mana fixing, it's going to be easier to do that. Still, at the end of the day, it's just really not a commander that stands out all that much in the field of 5-color commanders, and so it is definitely a C tier level commander, but in the future, if there's more and more party support, this could definitely move up. And starting off the B tier, we've got the other Tazri commander with General Tazri. And this is one that I will mention. Yes, I know there are plenty of CDH lists out there that are very powerful. This one with something like, a food chain build. But like I mentioned at the beginning of this episode, CEDH decks are not taken into account for this casual tier ranking list. That being said, it's okay to disagree, and regardless, let's jump in the actual commander, a 3/4 human ally that costs 4 and a white. When General Tazri enters battlefield, you may search the library for an ally creature card, reveal it, put in your hand, then shuffle your library. And by paying Wooburg, ally creatures you control get +X until end of turn, where X the number of colors among those creatures. So this can be a great tutor specifically for an ally, or again a changeling, which is technically also an ally, and yeah, this can be a powerful ally tribal commander, or a powerful lord's commander in a way with certain builds. It is an effective commander with an ETB that of course can be abused in many ways by, maybe blanking or recasting, etc, etc, etc. Regardless, it is a middle tier commander in my opinion. So General Tazri, welcome to the B tier. Another commander that can be built ally tribal, or basically any tribe, or actually I built a tribeless version with this commander as well, which is pretty fun too. Regardless, more fun the balance is a 6/6 shapeshifter that costs 7, and it has, when it enters battlefield, choose a creature type. Spells of the chosen type you cast cost Wooburg less to cast. This effect reduces only the amount of colored mana you pay, and other creatures you control the chosen type get +1/+1. This is a good all-around generic kind of commander that can work with basically, again, any tribe. If you have a tribe that isn't supported with a commander that's really all that effective, you can utilize this one as a replacement, essentially. It can give you a lot of value, again, saving you a lot of mana throughout the game with that cost reduction, and it can be a nice little Anthem effect as well. And of course, then there's also, other kinds of builds that are a little more off the wall, like a more fun Monuments build that, you just focus on actually casting miscellaneous creatures an infinite number of times because of that cost reduction. Regardless of how it's built, though, Morophon of the Boundless is a pretty middle-of-the-road commander, and if you are building around a tribe that is an incredibly powerful one, and well-supported tribe, there's probably a commander out there that is more powerful than this one that this probably wouldn't be selected against, and we'll be seeing some of those commanders here in a bit. But yeah, again, Morophon the Boundless, welcome to the B tier. And joining you in the B tier is Ramos Dragon Engine, a 4/4 dragon that has flying and costs 6. It also has, whenever you cast a spell, put a +1 counter on Ramos Dragon Engine for each of that spell's colors. And by removing 5 counters from Ramos, add double Wooburg to your mana pool, activate this ability only once each turn. Now, obviously, without that restriction, Ramos would skyrocket up these charts quite quickly, but there is that restriction for a reason. Regardless, this commander can grow quite quickly and become a threat itself, and of course also just be a great source for a ton of mana when you need it. That being said, to make the most out of this commander, you really got to focus heavily on multicolored spells. So yes, I mean, this commander can be a bit more narrow on what exactly you want to do with it to try to get the most out of it. So at the end of the day, Ramos is definitely not a bad commander, but it's not one of the most powerful ones out there either, especially in 5 color. But yeah, definitely a B tier commander that is very solid. And speaking of a solid B tier commander that cares about multicolored spells, let's talk about Niv-Mizzet Reborn. Niv-Mizzet is a 6/6 dragon avatar with flying that costs WUBRG, and it has, when it enters the battlefield, reveal the top 10 cards of your library. For each color pair, choose a card that's exactly those colors from among them. Put the chosen cards into your hand, the rest of them your library in a random order. So by building this deck very specifically to have a ton of different guild cards in it, yeah, you can get a lot of value out of this commander with that ETB. But again, this build is just going to be, again, pretty narrow in what kinds of cards you're going to want to include in it, because if you don't include enough of those 2-color cards and enough, of a spread of those different 2-color cards, you're not going to get a lot out of that trigger. So a solid commander with the right build, but definitely a middle-of-the-road commander as well. So Niv-Mizzet Reborn, welcome to the B tier. And joining you in the B tier, we've got the Walking Talking Book with Cody Vociferous Codex. Cody is a 1/4 construct that costs 3, and it says you can't cast permanent spells. But by paying 4 and tapping it, you add WUBRG, and when you cast your next spell this turn, exile card to the top of your library to exile an instant sorcery card with lesser mana value. Until end of turn, you may cast the card without paying its mana cost. Put each other card exiled this way on the bottom of your library in a random order. So Cody is a very strange commander, but one that can be built in some really powerful ways. Again, it does have a massive downside that you can't cast permanent spells, but again, you get to basically just cascade into something, and if you set your deck up in a very specific way to revolve around a certain powerful card, you can basically just keep recasting that. Or at least I should say, cast it whenever you need it. I mean, there are different ways to actually build around this. I mean, my favorite is Inevitable Betrayal, which is a lot of fun. Might not be the most powerful version, but definitely a lot of fun. More powerful versions, though, might revolve around other 0-mana cards like, Living End, where you essentially just cycle a bunch of creatures, get them into your graveyard, and then make everyone sacrifice all their creatures, and you get a ton of creatures out. Or like Hypergenesis, where you set yourself up to actually just get a ton of things for free into play that are going to be more massive than your opponents. And of course, there are combos that you can set up as well with this commander, but yeah, Cody is definitely not one of the most powerful 5-color commanders out there, but it can definitely pack a punch with the right build, and it is a B-tier commander. But now it's time for us to move on to a very different kind of commander with Child of Lara. That's right, the Space Baby itself. Child of Lara is a 6/6 trampling avatar that costs WUBRG, and it says, well, I should probably say its Oracle text reads, when it dies, destroy all non-land permanents, they can't be regenerated. Now, this commander was a lot worse before the rule change that essentially made it so that commanders' death triggers happen, whether they go back to the command zone or the graveyard, etc., etc., etc. So with that rule change essentially making it so that when Child of Lara, dies and you still want to go back to your command zone, you still get that trigger and you wipe out everything. And of course, with this being a massive board wipe in your command zone, you can basically keep doing this again and again and again quite a few times throughout the game. That being said, outside of a board wipe, yeah, Child of Lara really isn't bringing all that much to the table. A 6/6 trampler is nice, but not all that threatening in many circumstances compared to what a lot of the other commanders out there can do. So Space Baby, welcome to the B tier. Also at the B tier, we've got Sis-8 Weatherlight Captain, a 2/2 human soldier that costs 2 and a white and has. Sis-8 Weatherlight Captain gets ++1 for each color among other legendary permanents you control. She also has pay WUBRG, search your library for a legendary permanent card with converted mana cost less than Sis-8's power, put that card on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. So the more power Sis-8 gets, the more valuable that ability becomes. And of course, Sis-8 can just gain power with more and more things in play, or, you also have other ways to gain power too, like, a simple equipment, like, a Blackblade Reforged can help. But yeah, once you're set up, you can tutor for some incredibly powerful legendary permanents. That being said, yes, that is a big investment as well with that WUBRG ability. So again, this is a good commander, a solid B-tier commander, but in comparison to some of the top-end commanders in 5 colors, she definitely belongs in the B tier. And joining her in the B tier is one of my personal favorite commanders with Garth One-Eye. Garth is a 5/5 human wizard that costs WUBRG and has... Tap, choose a card name that has been chosen from among Disenchant, Brain Geyser, Terror, Shivan Dragon, Regrowth, and Black Lotus. Create a copy of the card of the chosen name. You may cast the copy. So, Garth is kind of like a Swiss Army knife of commanders. It gives you access to a lot of cards, a lot of really old cards from Alpha, essentially, but yeah, those cards have some varying levels of effectiveness. Disenchant and Terror are obviously good removal. Brain Geyser is a fantastic draw spell and a potential finisher as well. Shivan Dragon is pretty lackluster. I mean, on all honesty, not a very good card, but yeah, that's the red one you're getting. Or at least I should say, not good anymore. It used to be really good. Anyways, regardless, Regrowth is a great way to get cards back, in Black Lotus as well. A banned card in Commander for a reason. Now, while there are some very powerful things that you can do, this Commander does require quite a bit of setup. That being said, yeah, Garth is a very solid Commander, but a middle-of-the-road Commander. So, Garth One Eye, you might be one of my favorites, but you are still a B-tier Commander. Again, this is not a popularity contest, but a power level contest. And speaking of popular, one of the most popular commanders from this year so far is Go Shintai of Life's Origin. It's a 3/4 legendary enchantment creature shrine that costs 3 and a green, and it has pay Wooburg, tap, return target enchantment card from your graveyard to the battlefield. And whenever it or another shrine enters the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 color shrine enchantment creature token. Now, first off, yeah, there are certain ways that you can actually build around this commander that don't involve shrines really at all. If you want to build, say, a deck where you're trying to just get like Omniscience into your graveyard and then cheat out to play with this, that can be a very effective build. Regardless, the vast majority of builds around this commander are based around shrines, and those are still very impactful as well. You can flood the board pretty quickly with this and other shrines, and of course, with every shrine that comes into play, you're getting even more shrines. That being said, those shrines that you are getting are a bit more vulnerable, being creature tokens. And the most recent shrines that we got from the most recent Kamigawa set are also creatures too, so yes, a little more vulnerable. Now, that being said, this commander definitely gets more and more powerful with the more shrines that do come out, though we might not be seeing some for quite a while. And of course, if we get even more enchantment shrines that are not creatures, which of course again can be hard to deal with than creature versions, this power level can keep rising and rising. But at this point, there are only so many shrines out there, so yeah. Go Shintai of Life's Origin, for the time being, you are a B tier commander. But finally, rounding out the B tier, we've got Cecily, Haunted Mage, and Otham Sigarden Outcast. This is our only partner commander, well, okay, maybe I should say Friends Forever commander, that is a 5-color commander combination. And if you're wondering where these cards came from, if you've never seen them before, well, these are the Magic versions of the Stranger Things cards with 11 and Mike. Cecily is a 3/5 human wizard that says your maximum hand size is 11 and it costs 1 blue, black, red. When she attacks, you draw a card and you lose 1 life. Then if you have 11 or more cards in your hand, you may cast an instant or sorcery spell from your hand without paying its mana cost. And then Otham Sigarden Outcast is a 2/2 that has pay 2 and tap 2 target creature card in your graveyard that was put there from the battlefield this turn, return to the battlefield tapped. Each of these have some pretty powerful effects, but that being said, outside of, maybe just even saving Cecily in combat, they really don't work all that well together. They kind of go best with, working with 2 different strategies, where Cecily really wants you to draw cards and actually cast massive instant sorceries. Otham is more so like, hey, maybe we could use and abuse some giant creature ETBs and LTBs. So they've got some solid effects and are a good pair together, and again, if their abilities really work better together, they'd probably move up a tier or so, but yeah, at this point, these are B tier commanders. But now we are really getting up there in power level with the second most powerful tier, with the A tier, and we're going to start things off with Esca, God of the Tree, or maybe more sure I should say, the Prismatic Bridge. Esca is a 1/4 God with Vigilance that costs 1 green and has tap add 1 mana of any color, and other legendary creatures you control have Vigilance and tap add 1 mana of any color. And as Eddie has proven on an episode of Close Quarters, yeah, a legendary tribal deck built around this side can be very, very potent. That being said, the backside of this MDFC is probably even more potent with the Prismatic Bridge. It's a legendary enchantment that costs Wooburg, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a creature or planeswalker card. Put that card onto the battlefield and the rest of the bottom of your library in a random order. So this can get you essentially free value on each of your turns, getting potentially some massive things off the top of your library. I mean, obviously there's a lot of different directions that you can go with this, being like, okay, yeah, let's just have a ton of either really powerful planeswalkers in the deck and maybe a bunch of wraths to clear the board just so that we keep them protected. Or, you can go with some Eldrazi. Maybe, all the Eldrazi. Just have some massive annihilator effects that can wipe out your opponents very quickly. And you can even go in a probably jankier version where you just build the deck around one very specific creature, which, yes, can be very janky. Or, if you've got a way to combo with that, potentially very powerful as well. Regardless, each of these sides can be very effective, and yeah, definitely an A-tier commander in my book. Next up, one of the very first commander decks that I ever built in one of my very first episodes of all time. I think it was episode number 2, actually. We've got Joda Archmage Eternal. Joda is a 4/3 human wizard with flying that costs 1 blue, red, white. And Joda has, you may pay WUBRG rather than pay the mana cost for spells that you cast. Yeah, cheating on mana cost is always going to be a very powerful thing, and there's some really disgusting things that you can do with Joda. With a deck heavily focused on ramping and fixing mana, you can cast multiple spells pretty quickly that cost an absurd amount of mana thanks to Joda's ability to essentially just let you cast massive spells for just 5 mana as long as you've got that perfect mana fixing. And of course, those giant spells that you're casting can either help you get out, more resources like more lands or more treasures to cast more things, or maybe some extra turns, or maybe ways to untap your lands. There's a lot of powerful things to do with this commander that can just help you essentially take over the game in absolutely no time once you are set up. So yeah, Joda Archmage Eternal, in my opinion, definitely an A tier commander. Next up though, a very different kind of commander, but still a very powerful one. Let's talk about Reaper King. Reaper King is a 6/6 legendary artifact creature scarecrow that costs, get ready for it, 2 are white, 2 are blue, 2 are black, 2 are red, and 2 are green. So essentially either 10 mana in total or, some combination of this where it can go all the way down to just 5 mana as long as you've got the fixing for it. And as a potentially 5 mana commander, this has a really disgusting effect. First off, other scarecrows you control get ++1, which, okay, that's nice, but still the disgusting part is whenever another scarecrow comes into play in your control, destroy target permanent. Essentially every single one of your scarecrows, it basically is a Vindicate just stapled onto it just with it coming into play. Which, of course, yeah, you can easily use and abuse this effect. There aren't really all that many powerful scarecrows out there, but it really doesn't matter all that much when just getting a simple, even 1 mana scarecrow into play can knock out any permanent on the board. And of course, if you've got plenty of ways to blink that or to just get it back out again and again and again, you can just keep taking out whatever you need to take out. Or of course, you can utilize clone effects or something like a rival application to just take out basically everything when you need to. And keep in mind that changelings count as scarecrows as well. So yeah, Reaper King, overall a disgusting commander with an incredibly powerful trigger that even though, again, scarecrows aren't a very well-supported tribe and there's not really all that many out there, there are enough out there and, with changelings as well, and of course enough ways to use and abuse them that you can really take over the game pretty quickly with this commander. So at the end of the day, Reaper King, definitely an A tier commander. Moving on, how about Scion of the Dragon, a 4/4 dragon avatar with flying that costs WUBRG that has pay 2, search your life for a dragon permanent card and put it in your graveyard. If you do, Scion of the Dragon becomes a copy of that card until end of turn, then shuffle your library. Now, dragons are definitely one of the most supported tribes out there, and yeah, we've had a ton of dragons throughout the years in Magic, starting from the very beginning up until now. And actually, I believe dragons just took over at the second most popular tribe. Yeah, they just took over from elves, essentially. So yeah, they're right behind zombies. Right up there is an incredibly powerful and popular tribe. So with Scion of the Dragon's ability, you've got a ton of great options to pick from. And of course, there are, certain combos that you can essentially do to be able to take out a player essentially in one shot with this if you're set up correctly. Now, as powerful as that is, and as powerful as Dragon Tribal is, in 5 color, there are just more powerful commanders out there. So although Dragon Tribal is something you really need to be scared of, and you really need to take seriously, inside their dragon, you really need to take seriously if it's swinging at you, because it can take you out in one shot if, again, there's the proper setup. Be careful against this one, but it is still an A tier commander, not quite to the S tier. So with that, next up, we've got the Dragon itself, the most popular Dragon Tribal commander out there. And for a reason, this is an incredibly powerful commander that is a massive heavy hitter itself. It's a 10/10 flying dragon avatar that costs 4 and WUBRG, and it has Eminence. As long as it's in the command zone or on the battlefield, other dragon spells you cast cost 1 less to cast. On top of that, whenever you attack with one or more dragons you control, draw that many cards, then you may put a permanent card from your hand onto the battlefield. So Eminence is an incredibly powerful keyword and essentially just gives you a benefit just from the start of the game just by being in your command zone. You get to save mana on your dragons, and again, like I mentioned, there are plenty of really powerful dragons out there. And again, with that attack trigger, with the more dragons that you attack with, the more value you are getting, the more cards you are drawing, and the more options you have to just cheat something into play. Which, of course, on top of that, the Dragon, again, is a massive threat, a 10/10 flyer, which can very easily become a 2-shot KO with just an extra +1, +0 even, or a 1-shot KO pretty easily, again, in combination with certain other dragons. And again, as powerful as Dragon Tribal is, it's just not quite to that S-tier ranking. Still a force to be reckoned with, though, and yeah, I am quite scared of the Dragon, and is definitely an A-tier commander. And so to round out our Dragon Tribal commanders, though, let's talk about Tmon, another A-tier commander. Tmon is a 7/7 flying dragon god that costs 2 in WUBRG, and it has... When it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, search for life for up to 5 dragon cards not named Tiamat that each have different names, reveal them, put them in your hand, then shuffle. Again, Dragon Tribal has a ton of support and a ton of very powerful dragons that you can tutor for with this. And being able to tutor out the exact 5 dragons that you want is not only very powerful, but also very broken in a lot of situations. Because once you get those dragons and get a certain combination of them out, yeah, you could probably go infinite in a lot of different ways and essentially just win from there. That being said, it is a good amount of mana to invest to actually get that trigger. And again, this is a enter the battlefield trigger, but it has the requirement that you have to cast it, so you can't just abuse that trigger by blinking this, say, again and again and again. And obviously, again, because you have to reveal those dragons that you are getting, you are kind of tipping your hand in what you might be trying to do, especially again if you get some dragons that can combo together. Your opponents might then see you as archenemy and work together to try to take you down. Regardless, a very powerful commander and definitely an A tier commander, again with all the support that Dragon Tribal has, but still not quite up to the S tier standard. Moving on, a very powerful tribe and one that has some incredibly powerful commanders. Let's talk about Sliver Hivelord and Slivers. Sliver Hivelord is a 5/5 Sliver that costs Wooburg, and it says Sliver creatures you control have indestructible. This is a very simple commander that just essentially protects itself and your entire team in a Sliver tribal deck, and that is an incredibly potent thing. Slivers have abilities that benefit all of your other slivers, and with that, well, you can make your army absolutely massive. Even with the most tiny slivers in play, they're going to get pump effects from other slivers and can do some pretty disgusting things once you're set up properly. That being said, it does require setup, and though this commander does protect your team, it is obviously not a perfect form of protection. There are plenty of ways to get around this. I mean, first up, if an opponent just bounces this back to your hand, the rest of your team can then be vulnerable to a board wipe, or, they can also just exile with something like, a Path to Exile or Swords to Plowshares. Edict effects obviously get around this as well, so again, all of those slivers are a very, very, very powerful tribe, and this is a very powerful effect for them. It is still an A tier commander, not quite up to that S tier. So with that, we've got yet another sliver that has made the A tier with Sliver Overlord. It's a 7/7 Sliver mutant that costs Wooburg, and it has pay 3, search a library for a sliver card, reveal that card, put in your hand, then shuffle, and pay 3, gain control of target sliver. Now that second ability really isn't all that impactful unless you've got, a different kind of a build where you might be making your opponent's creatures into slivers. Sure, you can utilize that ability then to good effect. That being said though, if you're not doing that, the vast majority of decks out there don't run slivers, so you're not getting a lot of value out of that. But a repeatable 3 mana tutor effect to go get slivers from your deck is of course a very powerful thing. And of course, there are ways to reduce that cost to make it even more cost effective, and yeah, there's some very powerful things that you can do with that. Overall, a very powerful Sliver commander, but one that just, in my opinion, did not quite make it to the S tier. So, Sliver Overlord, you are joining your Sliver friends in the A tier. And the final 5-color Sliver tribal commander joining in the A tier is Sliver Legion. It is a 7/7 Sliver that costs Wooburg that has all Sliver creatures get ++1 for each other Sliver on the battlefield. Now, keep in mind, obviously, this is an effect that affects all slivers on the battlefield, not just your own, which obviously is a benefit in some ways, and also not great in some ways too, because you're pumping your opponent's slivers too. That being said, like I mentioned earlier, not a lot of players out there are running slivers in their decks unless their deck is built around, well, slivers. And while this is a massive pump effect, basically, again, a coat of arms in your command zone, and this can really help you finish out a game, outside of that, it's really not helping you in any other ways. So again, a very powerful effect, but not quite powerful enough to get it up to the S tier, so Sliver Legion, you are the final commander that we're bringing up in the A tier. But now it's time for us to start off the S tier with yet another Sliver commander that did make its way into the S tier with Sliver Queen. Sliver Queen is, well, first up, a very expensive card, being like $300 because it's on the reserve list. Regardless, it's a 7/7 Sliver that costs Wooburg. And it's a very simple card that just has pay 2, create a 1/1 colorless Sliver creature token. But though that ability is very simple, it's also incredibly potent. Again, slivers basically just have abilities that benefit all other slivers. So once you're set up and you've got an army of slivers, by just paying 2 mana, you make a single 1/1 sliver, but that sliver is going to become massive and have a ton of different benefits based on all the other slivers that are in play. And of course, on top of that, with this ability, there are some incredibly effective combos that work with Sliver Queen. I mean, one very simple and straightforward one is just, Ashnod's Altar. So with very minimal setup, you can essentially just, take all of your opponents out in a variety of ways with something like that in a combination of cards, or you can make infinite slivers or infinite mana. Yeah, there's a lot of powerful things that you can do with this. And yes, while I did say that I'm not including EDH combos, Ashnod's Altar is a card that definitely sees play, unlike, Food Chain, in more casual decks. So would I be at all shocked to see an Ashnod's Altar come out if I played against a Sliver Queen deck? No, not even at a casual table. I would still not be shocked, and I'd be very wary of it, and I'd be hopefully ready to take it out because, yeah, Sliver Queen is already an incredibly powerful commander and one that can combo in a lot of different ways. So because of all these reasons, Sliver Queen, you are an S tier commander. And joining you at the S tier, we have the final Sliver Tribal Commander with the first Sliver. It's a 7/7 Sliver that costs Wooburg, and it has Cascade, and Sliver spells you cast have Cascade. And cascading means that, again, when you cast the spell, you exile cards from the top of your library to exile a non-land card that costs less. You may cast without paying its mana cost, put the exile card to the bottom of your library in a random order. This Sliver Commander is essentially just a ton of free value. First up, when you cast it, you just get that Cascade trigger to get a lot of value out of it, and then once it's in play, it gets a lot grosser. Because again, by giving your Sliver spells Cascade, if you just cast, say one Sliver that's got a decently high mana cost, let's say 5 or 6 mana, you get to Cascade with that. Let's say you hit something else that's just slightly lower than that, then you get to Cascade again, then you hit another Sliver that costs slightly lower than that. You hit it again and again, and you can just take over the board in no time by casting just one spell by just getting a ton of free Slivers off the top of your library. Not to mention all the other value you just get from cascading into other cards too. So yeah, the first Sliver is already part of a very powerful tribe, and it has an incredibly powerful effect that can help you get a ton of creatures in that tribe just out in no time for you to take over the game. Definitely, in my opinion, an S tier commander, even without those food chain combos as well that you might see in CDH. Moving on though, let's talk about Negela the Blade Blossom, yet another S tier commander. Negela is a 3/2 human warrior that costs 2 and a red that has, whenever a warrior attacks, you may have its controller create a 1/1 white warrior creature token that's tapped and attacking. And by paying Wooburg, we untap all attacking creatures. They gain trample, lifelink, and haste until end of turn. After this phase, the traditional combat phase, activate this ability only during combat. So this is a very low to the ground commander that can be incredibly aggressive, and it can be very easy to break it and go infinite with combat steps because of that ability. I mean, essentially with a very minimal setup in a card like Druid's Repository, there you go. You have infinite mana, essentially you've got infinite combats, you just win. So yeah, Negela is definitely a commander to be wary of, and even if you're not going infinite, just being able to pay 5 mana to be able to get an extra combat whenever you need to is an incredibly powerful thing. But yeah, the potential combo ability definitely puts this commander over the edge and makes it an S tier commander in my opinion. But finally, the last commander we're going to be talking about, and the final S tier commander, is Kenrith the Return King. Kenny is a 5/5 human noble that costs 4 and a white, and it has... Pay a red, all creatures gain trample and haste until end of turn. Pay 1 and a green, play +1 counter on target creature. Pay 2 and a white, target player gains 5 life. Pay 3 and a blue, target player draws a card. And pay 4 and a black, put target creature card from a graveyard onto the battlefield under its owner's control. Kenny is a Swiss Army knife like no other. You can do an incredible amount of things, and there's a ton of different directions that you can take this commander. And yes, there's some very broken things that you can do this commander as well. I mean, just basically, hey, if you generate infinite mana, you just win with this commander. Or should I say infinite mana, that includes blue, because you can just make all of your opponents just draw out. Sure, you can draw, whatever you want in your library too, but you don't need to because you just make your opponents draw out and lose. The amount of potential on this commander is absurd, and again, the amount of directions that you can take with it is absurd as well. Regardless, again, the combo potential really can't be overstated with this commander. You need to be careful if you are playing against this one. There's a lot of different ways that you can actually go about, generating infinite mana, and a couple actually even just involve Kenny itself, like, Composite Golem, plus any kind of a cost reducer like a Zerda. And even if you're not generating infinite mana, just Composite Golem plus, Impact Tremors, you win. So yeah, Kenny can take you out in a lot of different ways. It is an incredibly flexible, incredibly popular, and incredibly powerful commander that is definitely worthy of the title of an S tier commander. And with that, the show has come to a close, so it's my turn to hear from you. So in the comments below, let me know what your thoughts on this episode are, and as always, thank you again, and have a good one. This show and episodes like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. If you're looking for an easy way to help support this show, make sure that you like, share, and subscribe. Also, hit that bell notification icon so you don't miss any new episodes. You can also go check out our playmats and other merchandise at thecommandersquarters.com. We also have a ton of brand new t-shirt designs in stock, so make sure you check out those as well. Another easy way to support this show is with our TCG Player affiliate links. So whether you're buying a deck or individual cards, you can use this general link right here or one in the description. And the final way that you can support this show is by supporting us directly by becoming a patron. There are many benefits to being a patron, and I truly couldn't do this without all of their support.